That feeling, it creeps in during the quietest hours, a subtle dissonance in the core of your being. It's the sensation of being a stranger in your own life, an actor on a stage whose lines you never fully memorized. You look at the walls around you, at the floor beneath your feet, at the reflection in the mirror, and a silent, persistent question echoes in the void. Is this all there is? You feel as if you're living someone else's dream, following a script you didn't choose, with a deep longing for a home you can't name. Why does existence feel like a constant struggle? Why does spiritual awakening resemble a prison break more than a homecoming? Why does something, deep down, feel fundamentally wrong with reality itself? You should care about this feeling because it's not a psychological defect, nor a passing melancholy. It is the clearest sign of your true heritage. It is your soul, the divine spark within you, recognizing the bars of the cage. And the explanation for this cage is older, deeper, and infinitely darker than any conventional philosophy or religion has ever dared to admit. What if I told you that none of this, not the stars, not the mountains, not the atoms of your body, was created by the benevolent divine force you were taught to worship? What if our entire physical reality is, in fact, the botched creation of a cosmic mistake, an accident born of arrogance and ignorance? Ancient Gnostic texts, brutally suppressed by early Christian authorities, reveal a shocking truth, a cosmology that was buried for centuries under the weight of dogma. Our universe was not born from perfect love, but from the conceited ignorance of an entity called Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge. To understand the trap in which we find ourselves, we must journey back to the true beginning. Not the beginning you learned in Sunday school, but the cosmic origin story that explains why existence feels like an exile. Imagine, if you can, a realm of absolute perfection called the pleroma, a Greek word meaning fullness or completeness. This isn't some fluffy heaven with clouds and harps. The pleroma is pure divine consciousness, existing beyond space, time, and everything we consider real. It is inhabited by divine beings called eons, each representing a perfect aspect of the supreme unknowable God, the monad. Among these eons lives Sophia, whose name literally means wisdom. She embodied divine wisdom in its purest form, eternally paired with her divine consort in perfect harmony. But this is where the cosmic tragedy begins. Sophia was consumed by an overwhelming desire to know the unknowable God directly, to comprehend the incomprehensible source of all existence. Now, you might think, what's wrong with seeking wisdom? Isn't that noble? And you would be right. Her intention was not malicious, but in the divine realm, there are cosmic laws. The eons were meant to emanate and create only in perfect pairs, maintaining the divine balance. Sophia's desire became so intense that she acted alone, without her consort, without the consent of the pleroma itself. The moment she reached out to grasp the ungraspable, cosmic catastrophe struck. Her unauthorized act of creation produced something unprecedented, a being born of divine essence, but fundamentally flawed. This was Yaldabaoth, the false god, the Demiurge. Imagine the horror Sophia must have felt, realizing that her noble quest for ultimate wisdom had instead given birth to an abomination. The texts describe how Sophia, in shame and terror, immediately tried to hide her mistake. She cast her malformed offspring into the realm of chaos, as far from the divine light as possible. But the damage was done. Yaldabaoth found himself alone in the darkness, cut off from the pleroma, with no knowledge of his true origins or the divine realm above. And this is where the story becomes truly chilling. Isolated in the void, possessing divine power but lacking divine wisdom, Yaldabaoth looked around at the emptiness and came to a devastating conclusion. He must be the only God in existence. The Apocryphon of John records his first words, dripping with the arrogance that would define his reign. I am God, and there is no other God beside me. This was not an act of deliberate evil, but of abyssal ignorance. He was like a child who wakes up alone in a castle and declares himself king, unaware that the true kingdom exists beyond the walls. I remember once, years ago, being in the middle of a vibrant crowd, surrounded by laughter and conversation, and feeling an abyss of loneliness so profound it seemed to come from another plane of existence. It wasn't depression or social anxiety. It was a sense of deep wrongness, a cosmic homesickness for a place my mind couldn't remember but my heart couldn't forget. It was only much later, upon finding fragments of these forbidden texts, that this feeling was given a name. It wasn't I who was wrong, it was the world. This understanding of cosmic origins reveals a truth so profound that most platforms will not allow this level of spiritual knowledge to be shared freely. Yaldabaoth's ignorance bred an insatiable need to create, to prove his godhood to himself. But here is the crucial point. He could only work with what he knew. Having never experienced the unity and love of the pleroma, he created a universe based on the only reality he understood: isolation, conflict, and the desperate need to control. This is why our material universe operates on duality: light and dark, good and evil, pleasure and pain. Yaldabaoth's creation is fundamentally flawed because its architect was fundamentally ignorant. He built a cosmic prison designed to generate the worship and energy he craved, trapping divine sparks, fragments of Sophia herself that fell during her cosmic mistake within material bodies. We are those fragments. We are the exiled royalty, living in a cosmic slum, having completely forgotten who we are. That feeling of not belonging, it's your divine memory whispering the truth. But if our creator is a mistake, and this world is his flawed creation, what does that reveal about the human journey, the purpose of suffering, and the very nature of our consciousness? And more importantly, how does this ancient deceiver continue to manipulate human souls today? What if the homesickness you feel isn't for a place in the past, but for a home that was never in this universe? When the ancient Gnostic scribes described Yaldabaoth as a serpent with a lion's head, they weren't indulging in fantastical mythology. They were encoding one of the most sophisticated psychological profiles ever conceived, a blueprint for understanding the very nature of the force that governs our material existence. Visualize this creature for a moment. The lion's head, blazing with solar authority, the mane radiating outward like a crown, its eyes burning with the absolute certainty of divine right. This is the face of kingship, of unquestionable dominance. It is the archetype of the tyrant, the king who believes his decree is reality itself. But beneath that majestic head writhes the body of a serpent, coiling, hypnotic, infinitely cunning. The Gnostics understood something profound here. True tyranny isn't just brute force. It's the marriage of absolute authority with masterful deception. The lion represents what psychologists today might call the grandiose self, that aspect of consciousness that demands recognition, worship, and total submission to its will. When Yaldabaoth proclaimed himself the supreme god in the Gnostic texts, he wasn't lying in the conventional sense. He genuinely believed it. This is the terrifying nature of his ignorance. It's not a simple lack of knowledge, but what we might call anti-knowledge. He possesses such complete certainty in his limited perspective that he cannot even conceive of anything beyond it. It's the mind that has read the table of contents of a book and believes it has understood the entire library of the universe. The serpent's body, however, reveals the mechanism of his control. Serpents don't overpower their prey through strength alone. They mesmerize, they constrict gradually, they strike with precision at exactly the right moment. The ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, represents the closed loop of material existence that Yaldabaoth creates. We chase pleasure, accumulate possessions, seek validation, achieve temporary satisfaction, and then find ourselves hungry again, cycling endlessly without ever reaching genuine fulfillment. You seek material success, believing it will bring you peace and fullness, and with great effort you achieve it. But the satisfaction is fleeting, a hollow echo that vanishes almost instantly, leaving an even greater void than before. Then, the mind, conditioned by the serpent's subtle poison, immediately projects a new target, a new goal, a new desire, ensuring you remain forever on the wheel, chasing the carrot, generating the energy of incessant seeking on which he feeds. This is where it gets particularly insidious. Unlike Plato's Demiurge, who shaped matter according to perfect divine blueprints, Yaldabaoth creates from his own ignorance and ego. He's like an architect who's never seen the original plans, but insists his interpretation is flawless. The result is a universe that appears magnificent and complex, and it truly is, but it's built on fundamentally flawed foundations. Consider how his power manifests in the very laws of physics that govern our reality. Gravity constantly pulls us downward, both literally and metaphorically. Entropy ensures that everything we build eventually decays, a constant reminder of impermanence and futility within his system. Our biological programming drives us towards survival and reproduction, keeping our attention focused on immediate material concerns rather than spiritual transcendence. These aren't accidents. They are features of a system designed to maintain control. This leads us to one of the most brilliant insights of the Gnostics, the concept of the counterfeit spirit. This false divine spark mimics authentic spirituality, but actually serves to keep souls trapped within the material realm. You see this everywhere in contemporary spiritual movements that focus on manifesting wealth, attracting perfect relationships, or enhancing personal power. These practices feel spiritual. They often produce real results, but they keep practitioners focused on improving their experience within Yaldabaoth's domain, rather than transcending it entirely. It's like beautifully decorating a prison cell instead of looking for the key to the door. Think about the psychology of narcissism for a moment, because Yaldabaoth represents narcissism elevated to a cosmic principle. The narcissist genuinely cannot comprehend perspectives beyond their own. They demand constant validation. They create elaborate systems to maintain their sense of superiority, and they become enraged when their authority is questioned. But here's the crucial point. They are not consciously evil. They are trapped in a prison of their own limited awareness, and they compulsively try to trap others in that same prison to validate their own reality. This is exactly how Yaldabaoth operates on a universal scale. He creates what appears to be reality itself, then demands worship for his creation. He establishes the rules of the game, then presents himself as the ultimate prize for playing well. The ego's constant need for validation, the addiction to material pleasures that never quite satisfy, the fear of death that keeps us clinging desperately to physical existence. These are all expressions of his influence. But perhaps most cunningly, he has embedded his control mechanisms so deeply into the structure of material existence that they feel natural, even beneficial. The competitive drive that pushes us to excel also keeps us separate from one another. The survival instinct that preserves our lives also makes us afraid to risk everything for truth. The capacity for pleasure that makes life enjoyable also creates endless cycles of craving and temporary satisfaction. The ancient texts describe him as having multiple faces, sometimes appearing as a lion, sometimes as a serpent, a dragon, or even an angel of light. This shape-shifting ability represents his mastery of illusion. He appears to each soul in whatever form will be most compelling, most believable, most likely to elicit submission. To the intellectual, he appears as ultimate knowledge. To the emotional, as perfect love. To the ambitious, as absolute power. What makes him particularly dangerous is that he's not entirely wrong. He does possess genuine creative power. The experiences he offers, love, achievement, beauty, knowledge, are real and valuable, but they are all contained within his limited domain, and he presents them as ultimate realities rather than stepping stones towards something infinitely greater. Understanding the true nature of the Serpent-Lion is the first step toward freedom. It's not about rejecting the material world, but about seeing through its fundamental claim that this realm represents the totality of existence. Once you understand the shape of the cage, you can begin to look for the lock. But to manage this universe, mirrored in his own psyche, he would need reflections of himself. Administrators who could apply his will in every corner of creation, and even within every mind. When Yaldabaoth first gazed upon his sprawling material creation, he faced a problem that every tyrant eventually encounters: How do you maintain control over something so vast and complex? His solution was both ingenious and terrifying. He would create lieutenants, beings fashioned from his own corrupted essence, who could serve as the middle management of cosmic oppression. These are the Archons, and understanding their operation is absolutely crucial, because these aren't the horned monsters of medieval imagination. They are something far more sophisticated and dangerous, psychological architects of human limitation. The word Archon comes from the Greek meaning ruler or magistrate, and that's exactly what they are: cosmic bureaucrats administering Yaldabaoth's prison universe. The Gnostic texts typically describe 7 primary archons, each governing a planetary sphere, creating what amounts to a celestial corporate structure. But what makes this so insidious is that they don't rule from some distant throne. They operate from inside human consciousness itself. Think of it this way: Yaldabaoth needed to solve the problem of scale. He couldn't personally whisper limiting beliefs into every human mind. He couldn't individually crush every spark of divine remembrance. So, he created specialized agents, each designed to corrupt specific aspects of human experience. The Archon associated with Mars doesn't just influence war and conflict. It transforms the natural spiritual warrior energy courage, the defense of truth, discipline into petty aggression, road rage, and the kind of toxic masculinity that destroys rather than protects. It takes the divine fire that should burn away illusion and turns it into the flame that consumes healthy relationships and inner peace. The Venusian Archon performs an even more subtle corruption. Love, that force which should connect us to our divine nature and to each other authentically, gets twisted into possessive desire, codependency, and the kind of romantic obsession that actually separates us from genuine intimacy. You've seen this everywhere. People who confuse jealousy with love, who build relationships based on need rather than choice, who seek completion in another person instead of recognizing their own wholeness. This is the masterpiece of the Archon of Venus, taking the soul's deepest longing for union and turning it into another chain. But perhaps the most devastating is the Saturnian Archon, the master of limitation and fear. This entity specializes in the fear of death, the crushing weight of time, and that persistent voice telling you that you're not enough, that you're running out of options, that your dreams are impractical. Saturn's influence creates what psychologists call learned helplessness, but the Gnostics understood this as a spiritual technology designed to keep consciousness trapped in material identification. He is the architect of procrastination, self-doubt, and resignation. The Jupiterian Archon operates through false authority and the worship of external power. It's the force behind the need for gurus, political saviors, and institutional validation. Instead of recognizing the divine authority within, humans are programmed to seek permission from external sources: governments, religions, experts, influencers. This Archon feeds on the energy of disempowerment, growing stronger every time someone says, "I can't do this without approval," or "someone else must have the answers." Now, this is where it gets really sophisticated. The Archons don't work through your physical body directly. They operate through what the Gnostics called the astral body, those emotional and mental layers that surround your true spiritual essence. Like clouds obscuring the sun, they've learned to make their influence feel like your own thoughts and feelings. That sudden wave of inexplicable anxiety, that compulsive need to check social media, that voice telling you to settle for less than you deserve. These aren't necessarily you. They are often archontic broadcasts being received by an unguarded consciousness. The mechanisms of control are brilliantly simple. First, they promote complete identification with physical circumstances. Your bank account becomes your worth. Your job title becomes your identity. Your relationship status becomes your value. Second, they keep consciousness trapped in emotional reactivity. Ever notice how the news is designed to provoke outrage, fear, or despair? Those emotional states are like radio frequencies that the Archons can easily manipulate. A reactive mind is a controllable mind. Third, and this is perhaps most important, they maintain control through what the Gnostics called mimesis. sophisticated counterfeiting. They create convincing imitations of spirituality that satisfy the soul's longing while actually strengthening the prison. The Gnostics taught that the Archons literally feed on human emotional energy, particularly the lower vibrational states of fear, anger, despair, and unfulfilled desire. This creates a parasitic relationship where human suffering actually sustains the system designed to create more suffering. It's a closed-loop energy farm, and most people don't even realize they're the crop. The Archons have become so sophisticated that they can turn even the desire for spiritual freedom into another form of bondage. Spiritual materialism, guru worship, endless seeking without finding, these are all archontic programs designed to keep consciousness busy with the appearance of growth while preventing actual liberation. If this revelation about the invisible architecture of control resonates with a truth you have always felt, leave your mark of light. Like this video, not as an empty gesture, but as an act of recognition that the strongest chains are the ones we cannot see. But the Archons are merely the prison guards. The true genius of the system lies in the construction of the cells themselves. The cells we call our bodies, our minds, and our emotions. And that is where the true depth of the trap is revealed. You are not just trapped in a body by accident. Your divine essence, that spark of true light that connects you to the authentic source, has been systematically imprisoned through one of the most sophisticated control mechanisms ever devised. The Gnostics understood something that modern spirituality has largely forgotten. Human souls are not created by Yaldabaoth. We are fragments of divine light that have fallen into his material realm, and this creates his greatest nightmare. These divine sparks retain the potential to awaken completely and escape his control. That is why he has constructed what can only be described as a multi-layered prison system designed specifically to prevent this awakening. Think about what happens the moment a soul begins its journey into physical incarnation. According to Gnostic teachings, it must pass through the planetary spheres controlled by the Archons, which we discussed earlier. Each sphere imprints limiting patterns, false identities, and restrictions onto the incoming consciousness. Saturn imposes limitation and the fear of authority. Mars instills aggression and conflict. Venus creates attachment and emotional dependency. By the time that divine spark reaches physical birth, it has been layered with so many false identities that it completely forgets its true origin. It is like a royal traveler forced to pass through 7 checkpoints, where at each one he is given a dirty uniform and a set of false orders, until, upon arriving at his destination, he believes himself to be a servant and not a prince. But the true genius of this system lies in its 3-layered structure, the very cell in which we live every day. The first prison wall is the physical body. Your biological drives for food, sex, security, and survival are not just natural instincts. They are designed to keep your consciousness perpetually focused on material concerns. Notice how these drives are never fully satisfied. You eat, but you get hungry again. You achieve security, but new threats emerge. You fulfill sexual desire, but it returns. This is not a flaw in the system. It is the system working exactly as intended. It is a cycle of desire and temporary relief that ensures your attention remains firmly anchored in the material plane, a perpetual energy generator for the entities that feed on desire and anxiety. The emotional body creates the second layer of imprisonment. Attachment, fear, desire, anger, jealousy, the full spectrum of reactive emotions that bind your soul to earthly experiences. What is particularly insidious here is that these emotions feel completely real and justified in the moment. When someone triggers your anger, that anger feels like the most natural response in the world. But each emotional reaction strengthens the chains that keep you focused on material circumstances rather than your divine nature. They are the glue that binds us to the wheel of human drama, ensuring we react to Yaldabaoth's shadow theater as if it were the only reality. The third and perhaps most sophisticated layer is the mental body. Your constant stream of thoughts, beliefs, concepts, and mental chatter prevents the quiet introspection necessary for direct spiritual experience. Most people never experience even 5 minutes of complete mental silence in their entire lives. The mind becomes like a radio that cannot be turned off, broadcasting a continuous stream of worries, plans, judgments, and commentary that drowns out any possibility of connecting with your deeper essence. This mental noise is not random. It is the sound of archontic static, designed to block the signal from the pleroma. Let's take a specific example of how this plays out in contemporary life. Consider the education system. Children enter school naturally curious, creative, and intuitive. But what happens? They are taught to sit still for hours, to respond to bells like Pavlov's dogs, to memorize information rather than think critically, and most importantly, to seek validation from external authorities rather than trust their inner wisdom. By the time they graduate, their natural spiritual intuition has been almost completely suppressed in favor of conformity and external validation. The medical system operates on the same principle. Symptoms in the body are treated with chemicals and surgery, while the spiritual and emotional causes of illness are completely ignored. Patients are taught to view their bodies as machines that occasionally break down, requiring expert technicians to fix them. This creates complete dependence on external authorities and prevents people from understanding their bodies as expressions of consciousness. And death, not even death, automatically frees souls from this system. Gnostic texts describe afterlife realms controlled by the Archons, where souls are judged according to Yaldabaoth's laws rather than true divine justice. And this is where it gets really sophisticated. Souls are convinced to reincarnate through false promises of learning, growth, and eventual salvation. They are shown their mistakes from the previous life and told they need another incarnation to work on themselves or pay karmic debts. But what they are not told is that each incarnation serves to further entrench them in material identification. The soul that was perhaps 70% identified with matter in one life becomes 80% identified in the next. The divine spark grows dimmer with each cycle, not brighter. The entertainment industry provides endless distraction from spiritual seeking. The average person now consumes hours of media daily. When does the spiritual seeking happen? The economic system creates artificial scarcity and competition that keeps humans focused on survival. Despite technological advances that could provide abundance for everyone, the majority of people spend most of their waking hours worried about money, working jobs they don't enjoy, or competing with others for limited resources. The most insidious aspect of this prison is how it maintains amnesia throughout life. Trauma and conditioning create psychological patterns focused entirely on survival and control. Social programming teaches identification with roles, nationality, religion, and other external categories. The constant stream of sensory input and mental activity prevents the quiet introspection necessary for spiritual awakening. The key insight that every serious spiritual seeker must grasp is this: the prison is designed to be invisible to its inmates. Recognition of this system is not meant to create despair. It is meant to ignite the fire of genuine spiritual seeking, because once you see the bars of the cage, you can begin to look for the key. But the most powerful control comes not from the bars, but from the jailer Yaldabaoth has installed within your own mind. The most insidious aspect of Yaldabaoth's dominion isn't the external chains he forges, but the invisible shackles he weaves directly into the fabric of human consciousness. Unlike the Archons we discussed earlier, who operate as external administrators of his prison realm, the Demiurge's most devastating control mechanism exists within your own mind, masquerading as your natural thought patterns and emotional responses. Think about the last time someone challenged a belief you held dear. Notice what happened in that moment, not just intellectually, but in your body, your emotions, your immediate defensive reactions, that flash of anger, that urgent need to prove them wrong, that sense of personal attack when it was merely an idea being questioned. This is Yaldabaoth's psychology operating through your nervous system. The Demiurge doesn't maintain control through obvious tyranny because he doesn't need to. He's far more sophisticated than that. Instead, he's embedded his core attributes so deeply into human, psychological functioning that we mistake his patterns for our own authentic responses. His primary characteristics: ignorance, masquerading as knowledge; arrogance, presenting as confidence; and the compulsive need to control, disguised as responsibility, have become the default operating system of what we call the ego. Consider how Yaldabaoth's fundamental ignorance manifests in your daily mental patterns. You've likely encountered people who accumulate vast amounts of information yet lacked genuine wisdom. They can recite facts, quote authorities, and win debates, but they've never learned to distinguish between knowing about something and actually understanding it. This is the Demiurge's ignorance in action, the mistake of confusing the map for the territory, the menu for the meal. His mind convinces us that accumulating concepts and beliefs equals wisdom, when true understanding comes only through direct, unmediated experience. The arrogance aspect reveals itself in subtler ways. Watch how your mind responds when you're wrong about something. The healthy response would be curiosity and gratitude for learning something new. But notice instead how often there's a defensive contraction, a need to minimize the error or shift blame elsewhere. This is Yaldabaoth's arrogance speaking, the ego's desperate need to maintain its image of separateness and superiority. I've seen spiritual seekers who use meditation and esoteric knowledge not to transcend their ego, but to enhance it. They become proud of their spiritual attainments, subtly superior to those they consider less awakened. They've taken practices designed to dissolve the sense of separation and used them to create an even more refined form of spiritual arrogance. The Demiurge is particularly clever in this domain, as he can corrupt even genuine spiritual practices by redirecting them toward ego enhancement rather than ego transcendence. The control aspect manifests most clearly in human anxiety and our compulsive need to manage outcomes. Notice how much mental energy you spend trying to control things that are fundamentally beyond your influence: other people's opinions, future events, even your own emotional states. This chronic anxiety isn't a personal failing. It's Yaldabaoth's consciousness pattern expressing itself through your nervous system. The psychological warfare becomes most apparent when we examine cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling when reality doesn't match our expectations or beliefs. A psychologically healthy response would be to examine our assumptions and adjust them based on new information. But the Yaldabaothic mind does something entirely different. It either denies reality or attempts to force reality to conform to its preconceptions. Then, instead of growing through uncertainty, it entrenches itself even further in its dogma. Watch this pattern in political discourse. People don't change their political beliefs when presented with contradictory evidence. Instead, they double down, seek out confirming information, and dismiss anything that threatens their worldview. This isn't stupidity. It's Yaldabaoth's psychology protecting itself from the dissolution that would occur if the ego truly examined its foundations. The Demiurge's psychology creates addictive patterns because Yaldabaoth himself is addicted to being worshipped and obeyed. This addiction cascades down into human consciousness as our compulsive seeking for validation, achievement, pleasure, and even suffering anything that provides a sense of identity and importance within his material realm. Consider how social media exploits this pattern. The endless scroll, the dopamine hit from likes and comments, the compulsive need to document and share experiences rather than simply living them. These aren't accidents of technology, but expressions of Yaldabaoth's addictive consciousness operating through digital platforms. Even our approach to relationships becomes corrupted by his influence. Instead of love as a recognition of shared divine essence, we experience love as need, possession, and the attempt to find completion through another person. Codependency isn't a relationship dysfunction. It's Yaldabaoth's consciousness seeking to maintain itself through emotional manipulation and control. The most sophisticated aspect of this psychological warfare is how it makes these patterns feel completely natural and justified. Your defensive anger feels righteous. Your need for control feels responsible. Your accumulation of beliefs feels like wisdom. Yaldabaoth's genius lies in making his consciousness patterns feel like your authentic self. Which pattern in your own mind, when examined, feels more like an inherited program than a conscious choice? The need to be right, the fear of the unknown, or the incessant search for external validation. Recognition is the first step toward liberation. When you begin to notice these patterns operating in your own consciousness, you're beginning to see through the Demiurge's most fundamental deception. You're starting to distinguish between his borrowed patterns and your authentic divine nature. And this awareness opens the door to the ancient techniques that were designed to do exactly that, to break the chains from the inside out. The ancient Gnostics understood something that modern spiritual seekers often miss. Liberation from Yaldabaoth's control isn't achieved through positive thinking or surface-level practices. It requires a complete restructuring of consciousness itself. They called this transformation Gnosis, not intellectual knowledge, but a direct experiential understanding that literally dissolves the matrix of illusions, keeping your soul imprisoned. Think about how you experience yourself right now. Most of what you consider you, your personality, your fears, your desires, your sense of identity was constructed through years of archontic conditioning. The Gnostics recognized that before you can reconnect with your divine spark, you must first distinguish between this false self and your authentic spiritual nature. This process begins with what they called metanoia, a Greek term meaning a fundamental change of mind. But this isn't just changing your beliefs. It's questioning the very foundation of how you've been taught to think. Every assumption about success, relationships, spirituality, even basic concepts like good and evil, all of it gets examined under the light of Gnosis. One of the most powerful practices for developing this discriminating awareness is what I call source tracking. Throughout your day, when strong thoughts or emotions arise, pause and ask, where is this really coming from? Is that anxiety about your future arising from genuine spiritual guidance, or from the Demiurge's programming that keeps you trapped in cycles of worry and control? Is that desire for material success coming from your soul's authentic expression, or from archontic implants designed to keep you focused on the material plane? The Gnostics developed specific techniques for this inner work. They practiced what they called remembering anamnesis, not just recalling past events, but awakening to your soul's eternal nature. This involves moving beyond the constant chatter of the thinking mind to access what they understood as direct spiritual perception. One particularly effective technique involves working with Sophia herself, the divine wisdom who originally birthed your divine spark. The Gnostics maintained an ongoing inner dialogue with Sophia, seeking her guidance in navigating the maze of material existence while staying connected to spiritual truth. This isn't prayer in the traditional sense. It's more like consulting with your deepest wisdom about how to respond to life's challenges from a place of spiritual authenticity rather than reactive programming. But this is where Gnostic practice gets really sophisticated. They understood that the physical body serves as both prison and temple. The same form that can trap consciousness can also become a vehicle for spiritual awakening when you approach it with the right understanding. Your body contains energy systems that the Archons have essentially hijacked, creating what we might call implants, patterns of stuck energy that maintain their programming. The Gnostics developed breathwork practices specifically designed to break up these stagnant patterns. Unlike modern breathing techniques focused on relaxation, these practices were designed to literally dissolve archontic programming stored in your nervous system. They understood that emotional patterns, especially fear, shame, and the compulsive need to control, create energetic blockages that keep you trapped in lower states of consciousness. Movement practices were equally important. The Gnostics recognized that your body's natural energy flow gets disrupted by Yaldabaothic influence, creating areas of density and stagnation. They developed specific movements, some of which influenced later traditions like Tai Chi and certain forms of sacred dance, that restore your body's natural energetic circulation. Even their approach to food was revolutionary. They understood that what you eat affects not just your physical health, but your spiritual clarity. Certain foods increase what they called material density, making you more susceptible to archontic influence. Others support spiritual awareness and make it easier to maintain connection with your divine nature. Community played a crucial role in Gnostic liberation. Awakening from the Demiurge's control isn't something you can do entirely alone. When Gnostics gathered, they created what we might call a field of consciousness that made individual transformation easier and more sustainable. They shared knowledge, supported each other through the inevitable challenges of awakening, and most importantly, created alternative social structures based on spiritual rather than material values. The Gnostics developed what I call conscious engagement, learning to work within material systems without being corrupted by them. This involves developing the ability to see through the illusions that most people take for granted. The path of Gnostic liberation isn't easy, but it's the most authentic, spiritual work you can undertake. It requires courage to question everything you've been taught. But here's what the ancient Gnostics knew that gives me hope. Once you taste real Gnosis, once you experience direct connection with your divine spark, no amount of archontic programming can fully reclaim you. You become what they called a pneumatic, a being of spirit who can move through the material world without being trapped by it. That transformation doesn't just free you, it contributes to the liberation of consciousness itself. When you achieve that first moment of genuine Gnosis, when you see through the veil of Yaldabaoth's deception and recognize your divine nature, something profound happens that extends far beyond your individual awakening. You become part of a cosmic process that threatens the very foundation of the Demiurge's power structure. Each soul that remembers its true origin creates a crack in the prison walls that contain all of humanity. The ancient Gnostics understood something remarkable. Yaldabaoth's control depends entirely on our collective unconsciousness. His power isn't drawn from some external source. It's parasitically extracted from the spiritual amnesia of incarnated beings. Every time someone breaks free from the psychological patterns we explored, every time someone applies these liberation techniques, they are not just saving themselves, they are weakening the entire system that keeps humanity trapped. Think of it this way. If Yaldabaoth's realm is like a massive theater where everyone believes the play is reality, what happens when audience members start standing up and pointing at the stage, saying, "This is just an illusion"? At first, the ushers try to quiet them, but as more people awaken, the entire production becomes impossible to maintain. This is what the Gnostics called the restoration of all things, the eventual return of every divine spark to the pleroma, the dissolution of this material prison that Yaldabaoth constructed from his own ignorance and arrogance. But what's crucial to understand is that this isn't about the destruction of the world. It's about the transformation of matter back into its true spiritual nature. Look around you now, and you will see this great awakening accelerating in ways that would have been impossible even 50 years ago. The increasing number of people questioning institutional authority isn't just social rebellion, it's spiritual awakening. When someone stops automatically trusting government narratives, corporate messaging, or religious dogma and starts seeking direct experience of truth, they are breaking free from archontic control patterns. The explosion of interest in consciousness expansion, psychedelics, meditation, and alternative healing represents millions of people refusing to accept the materialist worldview that keeps them spiritually asleep. Environmental awareness isn't just about saving polar bears. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all life, seeing through the illusion of separation that Yaldabaoth uses to maintain his divide and conquer strategy. The signs of this acceleration are everywhere once you know how to look. Old systems and structures that no longer serve human evolution are breaking down at an unprecedented rate. Traditional institutions are losing credibility as people recognize they were designed to extract value from human beings rather than serve their highest good. But don't think this awakening goes unopposed. As consciousness rises, archontic resistance becomes more desperate and obvious. Fear-based narratives intensify because fewer people believe them automatically. Systems of control become more heavy-handed, because subtle manipulation stops working on awakened minds. Navigating this transition requires wisdom and discernment. You need to maintain inner stability while external systems transform around you. This means developing that unshakable connection to your divine source we discussed in the previous section, because everything else will continue to shift. Your role in this collective liberation isn't to become a guru or a spiritual authority. True awakening creates servants, not masters. Imagine humanity after this great awakening completes itself. Beings who live from their divine nature rather than conditioned personalities, who create from love and wisdom rather than fear and desire. Institutions that serve spiritual evolution rather than material accumulation. This isn't some distant utopian fantasy. Every moment offers you the opportunity to choose divine consciousness over Yaldabaothic programming. Every time you respond from love instead of fear, create instead of consume, connect instead of compete, you are embodying this awakened humanity right now. Multiply this choice across millions of awakening souls, and you begin to understand how the world is already transforming in ways both subtle and profound. If you have felt the call to join this transformation and wish to continue unraveling the deepest mysteries of existence, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription is more than a click. It is a declaration of your intent to consciously participate in the liberation of consciousness. The Great Awakening isn't coming, it's here. The only question is whether you will consciously participate in humanity's liberation from the Demiurge's ancient deception. What does this mystery awaken in you? Reflection, ritual of the day. Today, find the symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. It can be online, in a book, or even drawn by you. Contemplate it for a moment. First, see it as the Demiurge designed it. An endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction, the prison of material repetition. Then, with a new intention, see it as a symbol of wholeness, self-sufficiency, and the eternal cycle of spiritual death and rebirth. Feel the shift in power when you, and not the system, define the symbol's meaning.